Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner, where tonight we are going to talk about the magic number of practices or days in armor in a year that some of our coaches use to sort of gauge participation and ability to improve or opportunity to improve. So to get us started, I'm going to hand it off to Duke Brannos.
Howdy, everyone. I apologize. I was just pulling up our YouTube stream that actually also streams at the same time that our Facebook stream does. Lately, we've been getting some folks out there. I am trying to cover some of the questions there and on Facebook at the same time, but just be aware, it's normally we've been driven from Facebook a lot, but I'll again keep it, try to get both places. Welcome everyone to night, and like Sir Sadb said, tonight's episode's again about numbers. Our last number episode was a good one, and I think everybody liked it. And it was Barry's kind of did a survey and came up with kind of the idea of the number of fights you needed to become a knight, and it's kind of that number of practices you need, and practice could make up a lot of different things. My opinion is we focus a little too much on the idea that practice is just going out and fighting. There's lots of different ways to practice. So I think you'd be surprised what counts as in my heart for what a practice is. But tonight, Barry brought up, Barry's a good button pusher out there. So he brought up a fact that Sean kind of had a number. Sean has a number of the idea is, at least in our sport, 50, being out there 52 times a year is a great way to at least stay on the game and maybe push yourself a little forward. Less than that, I think in many cases, you're just trying to keep what you have. And I think that's what's going to come out. And that's what Sean kind of refers to. And then more than that, again, anytime you can do more, be careful, more bad is bad. But anytime you can do more that fits inside of what you're trying to do well, and it's something that's going to positively advance you, then, more is better in those cases. So tonight our coaches are, of course, Duke Sean with the magic 52 number. We have Sir Bari, who has all kinds of numbers in his head, and he loves numbers. So I'm sure we're going to dig into, what it takes to be a knight type of deal, and how he got those numbers and how it fits back to this 52 item. And then Viscount Tristan, who, obviously he comes from both the SCA and from real practical experience by running a dojo. So welcome everyone. I hope you had a great Christmas and New Year's and whatever holidays you support through that period of time. And same with everyone else. I hope everybody's healthy and happy. And we're starting a new year with looking at how we can improve ourselves. So on that note, Sean, can you tell us what this 52 number is all about? Mute.
You're on mute.
I'm muted, of course. Apparently, I don't want you to hear what I have to say about
that. Well,
this.
it's good. We start, the new year like we did.
Right.
Probably.
Start the year with you're on mute. New year, old you. So this magic number, right? Is it's 52. 52 times in armor fighting in a 1 year period, which really just gets down to once a week. And this is kind of something I came up with, many, many years ago, that I've just kind of used as a generic benchmark for really, what I consider to be an active fighter. And let's start off with all the, caveats and disclaimers that not everybody can get there. Time is a real factor, and that's understandable, and resources and access to, fighter practices. And if you're in a small place, you may not have enough people to do it. I get all of that. But the reality is, if you want to get good at what we do, you got to get time in the suit. And the 52 just fighting once a week is it is a baseline measure, and I will say that is entry level for improvement. Really, that's a maintenance frequency. You're gonna be about as good as you were. You're gonna stay about as good as you are. You can get better at that frequency, but if you want to get better faster, you absolutely have to be doing this just more. There's just no substitute for time in the suit, and once a week is really not that much to ask. And if you want to be exceptional at something, you got to go out and do the thing, right? And if you want to be good at what we're doing, you got to go out and do the thing. And if you can't do it, that's fine. And if you're enjoying where you are, that's fine. But the big thing for me is somebody sitting around saying, "How come I haven't midnighted? How come I haven't won cornet? How come I haven't won crown?" If you're only fighting 25 times a year, that's not enough. You are not going to get better if you're not fighting, if you're not at least targeting, trying to fight on a weekly basis. And by comparison, this is why I'm glad to have Tristan on here. If you're looking at an Eastern martial art, if you're going to an Aikido dojo, Tristan, you're talking about 3 to 4 times a week, on the mat, right? If you compare this to other Eastern disciplines, I think once a week is not really asking that much.
Yeah, and that's the question. I wish I had a nickel for every new and prospective student that came in, and they asked that one question. They ask every instructor, "Okay, so how long is it going to take me to get a black belt? How long is it going to take?" And it'll usually be, "Okay, well, you got to be realistic about your expectations. If you're going to come once a week, maybe you're looking probably at 8 to 10 years if you can stick with it." And I agree with Sean that once a week is basically maintenance level. Maybe a touch more if you do work outside of the practice, where you maybe work on footwork, you do some pel work, you're doing visualization stuff, hand-eye coordination training practice, or you come in with previous athletic experience. If you got a sport background and an athletic background, you can make a fair bit out of that once a week. However, what I will always tell them is, what I've seen, at least through my dojo and through most of the ones that I at least respect, 2 to 3 times a week means you can probably do it in about 5 years. If you do 4 times a week to 5 times a week, if you've got a dojo that's got that many classes, or you can attend that many, now you're looking at probably 3-4 years. And again, that depends on a lot of factors: your mental commitment, your drive and ambition. You can show up to class or practice and go through the motions and leave and get almost nothing out of that time. You can piss away 2 hours if all you're doing is checking in and, "Yep, I'm here and I got in my armor or I got on the mat," but your mind really isn't on what you're doing. You don't have much ambition. Then you're basically gonna spin your wheels. And I'll tell anybody, it doesn't matter the number of hours as much as, do you make the most of those hours that you are putting in? With the level of ambition, somebody can make 1 or 2 practices a week and they can advance remarkably. But another person can take 3 or 4 hours a week and just kind of show up, check in, put on their armor, maybe twink around a little bit, chat, have conversations, and they won't really advance very much. And be like, "Why am I not getting anywhere when I'm spending all this time? I'm going to so many practices. Why am I not, advancing?" So, yeah.
Brandon's on mute now.
All right, let's try this again. I learned from Sean.
How many times a week did he teach you about the mute?
It's I'm going to bring up a question here real quick from Nate, who I know out in California. And he's a relatively new fighter, probably a little over a year plus, maybe a year and a half. Been around a lot, doing a lot of the Great Fighters YouTube stuff with us. But he asked, is there a number of practices per week when you start doing preventive care? And, like icing after practice, stretching, all of those. First thing I would say is some of this depends on age and how fast you recover. Earlier in ages, you recover much faster. Preventative care, no matter what age, is always good. So stretching, rolling, hydrating, all of that is a constant from beginning to end. So those are things that you should think about. I'm not a huge pre-fight person as far as drinking and eating and all that stuff, but you should definitely at least understand through the fights. And it depends if it's a practice and depending on how hard you're grinding, you should try to find spaces in there, but after practice as well. As you get older, I can tell you right now, I spend probably maybe not 4 hours, probably about 2 or 3 hours a week stretching through the week, rolling my back, stretching. I have more and more stiffness in my hips and things like that. Ice as needed is my big piece there. It depends on heat and ice. Really depends on what kind of issue you're having with joints and things like that. But also those can be taken care of inside of your practice. And that is like the last 2 practices, I probably went a little too hard a couple practices ago. Shoulder, can't tell if it's the weather with the titanium shoulder or if it's weather based or I stressed it. So I've just been grinding out with a foam sword. And my shoulders feel much better. So, it doesn't mean you have to stop. I mean, last night I probably spent at least maybe 30, 40 minutes with Sir Sadb, who can't fight right now. Her arms, she has a number of issues with her arms and some nerve issues she's trying to track down. So she's in constant pain, but we put all her armor on. And we went out there and she had invisible sword and shield and we ground out footwork, 3 rounds of footwork through the time, probably 10, 15 minutes per round of footwork. And where, I have a sword and board and I'm, foam again. So every once in a while I gave her fakes. I'll touch something. She'll still throw stuff like with her finger type of deal. And we just, and we see how you can tell if you're like, there's a couple times she threw it as like that. It would have probably hit, you had it, you beat me in time. The question is targeting, but you beat me in time. So, there's still stuff you can do. So just, be aware there's no maximum. I've got other people like Sven's on right now. And, it's, I guarantee you, not only is he working out, but he's spending a couple days a week in armor doing stuff. I work with Sir Roshin, who at least twice a week in armor, 4 days of Pell, ladder work during the day at her lunchtime. She's just grinding it out constantly, right? So, but she also does massage, does hot pool, does all of these other things to make sure that recovery is a part of that. So it depends on how often, how much, and then every person is an individual. Make sure that what you're doing makes sense for you, that you're not forgetting life and responsibility, but also you're not destroying your body.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, I was going to say it's funny. So I didn't use a stretch or do any sort of preventative maintenance at all for a long time, and I got old. And I probably should have been doing it the whole time. But one thing I find interesting is every practice, I go through a full series of shoulder stretches for my bad right shoulder. And then this year, I do a pretty full series of stretches on my lower body. And almost every practice, someone makes a smart aleck comment about how I'm one of the first people there and the last person to actually start fighting. And it's basically like a joke, like implying that I'm lazy. And it's like, no, I'm actually doing the things you're supposed to be doing. And everyone should be doing this. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I think in our hobby, we don't encourage things like the stretching and the warming up and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would say as far as frequency goes, I think Brannos hit it a lot. It all depends on what you're capable of, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. I know that my body doesn't recover the same way it did in my 30s, and it damn sure does not recover the same way it did when I was a teenager. But as far as overall frequency, as a like once a week is, I'd say, bare minimum. If you want to get better. Twice a week will get you better faster. 3 times is aggressive. 4 times is way too much. Because after 4 times a week, your body simply does not have enough time to recover. I mean, even in the healthiest of bodies, if you're fighting 4 times a week, your body just doesn't have time to recover into that. And I would say that's the same. I mean, football practice or other martial arts, it's the same kind of thing. It's like you need some recovery. 2 will get you there faster. Three is aggressive. That's a lot. There was a question that popped up in the comments there. If Sadb can maybe bring that up, it was what do we define as a practice?
Yeah, exactly.
And when I'm talking about these 52 times a year, that is in armor, in armor fighting. It's not just practice. It's anytime you get in armor. And really, I mean, if you are primarily a melee person and you want to get better at melee, you got to be in armor once a week. And so if that's your jam, if that's what you want to do, then that's where you're going to be. Part of the discussion I had with Bari when he said that, last year he managed to get, 50 times in there. I think he was counting just practices, just single practice as well. I was like, for the purpose of what this magic number is, the whole point of this is get out there and do the thing.
That's
right. We don't need to get caught up in the weeds of what is practice and what is not practice. There's a lot of stuff, as Grace Fan had mentioned, and I totally agree. There is a lot of work that you can get done out of armor that is easier on your body, that is, that is not full on fighting. There's a lot of work that you can do there, and I highly recommend. I mean, if you can get 1 day of training, unarmored training, maybe hats and bats training, and 2 days of fighting in every week, you're going to get better faster, no doubt. So there is a lot of work you can do there. For the purpose of what this magic number is, I would not consider unarmored training to be counted amongst that. But if you're going to melees, that counts. If you put on your stuff and you're swinging stick at other people, that counts, right? And it's it's sort of just a personal accountability thing. This is something that Sir Brealton on the 100-day Pell Challenge is super huge on. It's just ownership, right? It's not like we're going to sit around and go, well, you only got 50 fights in, this year, so I got to make it, but it's like, I know this year, Bari said he got 50 fights in, or 50 days, and that's a day in armor, right? Now, if you go fight and then you take off your shit and then you put it back on later, that's not 2 days, right? So it's a day in armor. But you go to Penzik. I mean, I think I was at Penzik for the
5 days in armor.
Yeah, I was
10.
I was at Penzik 2 years ago or last year for a full 2 weeks, and I think I got 8 days.
Yep.
So, it's a lot, but you get that in there. So the other thing about this though is you can't just get 8 days at Penzik and then take 2 months off. Right? That's not the way the math works. The whole point of this is consistency. And it's being on a regular basis. This year I counted up and I got 36 days of fighting. I had 8 days of fighting in the month of April. That was a busy month for me. But then I was resting some things up in the summertime. Between May and August, I only fought 4 times during that period. So yeah, I was resting some things up. Still managed 3 weeks a month, 3 times a month. So I was pretty happy with that, but it was a thing that for as long as I've been talking about what this magic number is, I wanted to actually track it because I always kind of felt like I'm fighting enough. But, there's a little bit of the practice what I preach, but I wanted to know this year what that number was. And I'll be tracking it again this year to see if I can get some more.
Yeah. I want to add on to that if I can. So a lot of it is you have to do something that you can go to bed at night and think, I actually tried to practice. I actually tried to accomplish the goal. And as Sean said, I think we're really talking about armored practice. For myself, sometimes I'll be injured. I want to talk about this later about what can you do when you're injured to still get something out of practice. There's been some practices where we talk about doing some foam work. I'll do some foam work, but for me, it doesn't count unless I have my helmet on. I'm taking headshots. So I'll do that with maybe I'll just go in, throw on some foam, throw on a gorget, throw on a helmet, and then get some stuff in. But even then I have to make sure, okay, I went to practice and I really got as much as I could out of that, rather than I don't feel like fighting today. I'll bring my helmet, I'll throw it on, I'll do 2 passes and then count that as a day of practice. But again, for me, it's about motivation. So the reason why I do that is because I say to myself, well, I can't fight because I'm injured. But if I sit at home, I'm getting nothing out of this. So it's a way to motivate myself to actually get more out of it than I would do otherwise, not a way to cut corners and not do anything. So I don't know if the foam fighting, it's probably not as good as fighting with rattan, or at least, not all the time, but I'm getting something out of it. So that's sort of a personal rule I give myself. And then I write everything down, just like Sean said. I keep it in a blog. You can keep it in a spreadsheet. You can write it on a piece of paper and put it on the fridge. But that's the other big thing, is to track it. I come from a distance running background. I ran in college, and that's something that we all did. Like, our coach made it mandatory that every day you write down what your workout is, and then you track, the weekly numbers, and then you look at the entire year and you're like, why am I not getting better? It's like, well, because you think you're running all the time, but let's look at your log. Oh, this week you did almost nothing. That week you took off a bunch of days here. You went on vacation, did anything there. So just some thoughts there.
So we got a question. It's not a question; it was a comment, and I'm just typing something on this. I'm gonna show it up. Oops, wrong one. Boop, right there. Robert mentioned he counts practices as purposeful practices, and it's a good one because it goes right back to what Sven talks about. Practice for them is fundamentally the idea that it's structured practice. And again, that could be anything there. I mean, you could be practicing specific shots. You could be practicing defense. The one thing I want to put is, Robert mentions that when he goes in a tournament, it isn't about learning, but is it? Realistically, a tournament is even a better place for learning how to fight in tournaments. And if your goal is crown, then guess what? Winning tournaments and learning that pressure and that performance and how a tournament structure and getting used to those things is practice to go to, right? And so just be careful. I mean, and that's kind of structured up. I mean, here we have a foundation of technique, lay down a foundation of fighting, lay down a foundation of understanding how to compete, lay down, and then even under that, or from the bottom, people that don't fight, to the top, crown tournaments, there's a layer of understanding mentally how fighting works and how all that philosophy and things around that. This is the reason why we talk about books on the site all the time. And it's like there's a ton of the art of learning. All of these kinds of books help us understand fighting. And then video review. Lots of people review video that aren't fighters, and then some point they're like, I think I can do this. And I have seen where after reviewing, they come in and they know more right off the bat than somebody has never reviewed it, right? Because they watched it. And even more, going to the fight practice and watching fighting. I've seen people just put on armor and I'm like, you could authorize today if you want. right? I mean, they had some athletic talent, but they understood what was going on. So, and then even more at a crown level, you're looking at a scenario where both those things are super important. So from bottom to top, those layer in as well. So for those, this is just a real quick one. I get people to come to me all the time. It's like, hey, I want to win crown. I go, that's great. What are you doing? And they're like, well, I'm going to go to this many practices, and I'm going to go to this many of these tournaments, and I'm going to go to everybody's practice in the world, and I'm going to fly from here to there to blah, 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 blah. And I'm going, what are you doing physically? What are you doing mentally? And what are you doing spiritually? Because there's still your body that you have to strengthen. And there's the mind and understanding of the fight that you have to get better at. And, review that's that spiritual piece and there's that the understanding what's happening in fight. And that's a mental piece. You can get that a lot in review of videos. So just be aware, there's lots of things other than maybe helm time. But helm time this is coming back to the 52 days. Helm time is still critical.
Yeah. Hey, can I add something real quick to that? One of the things I've noticed with the people that don't practice as consistently, our local, actually, I'll give you a little bit of background on the Philadelphia practice. We had a good period of a couple of years where we had 4 fighters, 4 unbelts, me being one of them, who practiced weekly. We were all about the same level, and we pushed each other. And within 2 years, all 4 of us got knighted, and all 4 of us jumped a lot in that time period. And then we had a couple of other people that in the beginning of that, they were going about 50-50 with us. And then they more or less got left behind. I mean, they got down to winning half the fights to winning almost none of the fights. And I talked to them. I was like, it's not magic other than the magic number. You just had to show up every week, and you didn't. And in one case, there's a guy who is doing really well right now. He's found a good practice to go to and a good mentor. But he was getting stuck in these old patterns, and the rest of us had sort of figured him out. We're trying to tell him we need to do differently. But the problem was he only showed up about once every 2 to 3 weeks. And we noticed the pattern was he was either what he was working on, he would lose, because there's this thing where you start to work on something and you don't get it right away. And you have to kind of keep trying it out until it finally becomes natural. And as much as we say that you shouldn't try to win the practice, the reality is most of us try to win a lot of what we're doing. I mean, even if you're trying to win, right. And so what happens with someone that sort of, misses 2 weeks, they come back and they say oh my God, I want to see if I can beat Bari this time, or I want to see if I can beat, Brannos this time. I was doing pretty well against him last time. And the new thing they're working on doesn't work at all because they're not familiar with it. So what do? They just fall back into their comfort zone. That's something that Tristan had talked about before the show started. They fall back in their comfort zone, which means when you're only fighting twice a month, you're just always going to rely on that comfort zone. So I think that magic number of once every week is you try the new thing. Maybe it's crap the first practice. The next practice, it gets a little bit better, and you sort of start stacking until it becomes the new comfort zone for you. And I do think that 1 week is probably the magic number. And to add something what Sean said earlier is that if you get to 3 and definitely 4 times a week, then with our sport, you start getting a lot of injury problems, I think. I don't even think boxers would probably spar quite that much.
They don't spar hardly at all.
Yeah. So, you can practice. When I'm hot, I practice 7 days a week, but it's 1 day a week in armor, and then it's 6 days a week of Pell and footwork, and then a lot of gym time and stuff like that, video reviews. But yeah, for me at my age and with my damage, I'm about 30 passes a week, and that's all I can really handle of actually serious 100% fights.
It has to be hell to be young like you.
Well, I mean, speaking of magic numbers, if you're trying to get better about a thing, that like Bari is talking about here, one of the other kind of baseline measurements that I have is whatever new technique you're trying to get better at, it is going to take you basically 3 months for you to recognize improvement in the thing that you're trying to get better at. And that's 3 months at the frequency of once a week. For exactly the reason that Bari was talking about. It's you try this thing out, and and yes, it can be very frustrating. early on to not have any success because, hey, as Brannos often says, winning is fun too, right? We want to have the successes because that feeds the dopamine center of our brain, right? But if you're trying to get better at a thing, it's going to take you 3 months, and in that first month, everything you do is going to feel like a total disaster, and it's going to feel like a mess, and you're not gonna feel any improvement in it at all. After the second month, we as trainers are going to be able to recognize improvement in what you're doing. You may not be able to feel it, but it's not going to feel like a complete mess like it was before. And after about 3 months of working on the same technique, you are going to finally recognize improvement in the thing that you've been doing. And that is the point at which you get some sense of ownership of whatever that new technique is. And the hard part about this is, like Barry was saying, if you're only going to hit this every 3 weeks, you're not giving yourself the time for that to be integrated in your muscle memory and to really understand what those techniques are. And so again, you're going to get frustrated and you're just going to go back to the same old thing that was winning you fights against a certain amount of people because it feels good, right? So it's going to take you three months. And when I tell you 3 months, I mean at once a week to do that. And that kind of goes back to one of the things that we're always talking about is victory conditions, right? When you go to practice and you're working on a new thing, you have to commit to the improvement of that thing without any regard for wins and losses. And the real success and the real victory on the day becomes, I stuck to this, and boy, it sucked, but I stuck to it. And the more you stick to that, the more you're going to get better at those individual pieces. And when you get better at each little piece, that all eventually just adds up. And eventually that results in body count, right? And that's kind of the measure that we all basically use to feel like we're doing better.
So we got a question from Sir Gwen. Tristan, you want to grab this one?
I was actually looking at one above, which I would like to address as well. But
okay.
So it says, if you have the ability, I assume attending different practices is always a benefit. How much of the level? How much does the level / fighter skill variety of the practice matter? Especially if you find yourself training with others more than you can work on your things. There are many variables involved. Yes, if you go to a practice that's got a lot of knights and royal peers, you are going to feel challenged to step up and be able to compete at a higher level. If you go to a practice that's got a bunch of beginners, you're probably going to spend more time sharing basics with them and helping them out. Don't overlook those though, because I will tell you this: there is nothing that teaches you better than having somebody who's brand new ask you a question and cause you to completely vapor lock. Why do I do this? Why would I step there? Why, they'll ask you like a 5-year-old. That's the simplest question in the world. And you just say, I don't know. I don't know why I do this. And it will make you put a magnifying glass on your understanding of what it is you do and why it is you do it.
That's part of it.
I've met some elite fighters that are spectacular at doing their art. And then you ask them, how do you do what you do? And they're like, I don't know. I just go hit the guy. Yeah. And in asking them those questions, they have to introspectively look at, okay, why is what I do, why does it work? What is it I'm looking for that makes my shot land when other people try this exact same thing and it doesn't work? Because that's often what happens, right? Somebody says, well, I just did what I see you do, Your Grace, and I fail and you succeed. What's the difference? Well, if you don't know how to watch what they're doing and answer, well, you're throwing the exact shot that I do, but here's how I set it up. Here are the conditions I'm looking at to land that shot. You're throwing it into a closed, there's no opening there. I'm either creating an opening or I'm seeing the opening and I'm exploiting it. And so now you're talking about a level of vision, something that goes beyond just how quick their hands are, how good their footwork is. Now they're studying their opponent, or they're not studying their opponent, and they should be. And I did want to add one thing to Sean's description of the frequency of practice and whatnot. Is our fighting is a perishable skill. It's a set of perishable skills. It will degrade in time.
I want to have that conversation
later.
later.
Never think they will. You think, oh, I can take a month or two off, and I'll come back and I'll be right where I were. No, sir. And the question above that I did want to address, which was from Kat, does this apply to the rapier side of our game as well? It applies to rapier. It applies to boffer. It applies to playing a musical instrument. It applies to juggling. It applies to just about everything.
Your art and science. Don't matter.
If you don't do it, you will get rusty, and it'll sneak up on you. And I can attest to this personally. You tend to think that you're in a better position than you really are. So remember, you take a week off, your skill is degrading. Maybe not by a ton, but when you come back in 2 weeks, you're going to notice, this wasn't working as well as I thought it was. And if, like what Sean was talking about, if you're in mid-process of developing something and trying to get it to work, you're going to notice it like 10 times over, because you say, I was making some progress towards getting this approach to work or getting this tactic to work. And now I don't, it's gone. I'm now starting from square one. So just remember, all the skills that we work on are perishable, and that includes your judgment, range assessment. One of the things I would like to cover, and I think we're opening the door to this in this discussion, is, okay, there is the old school version of the helm time thing, and I do agree that that's important. But how much could we categorize the different aspects that we can train outside of just pure helm time and sparring, such as the footwork drills, hand-eye coordination drills, range control,
power generation,
drills and practice, power generation. I mean, all of that stuff, and not just pound on the pel either. I'm talking, almost Lomachenko style of, all right, what trait are we weak in, and what trait do we need to enhance? Whether that's eye speed, reaction speed, speed of movement. I know somebody in the we had some suggestions that were given to Coach's Corner, and one was, how do I work on building my speed up? Well, it may not just be put on your helm and go spar. It might be looking at developing, kind of like a basketball player. They work on passing drills, dribbling drills, teamwork stuff, motion, all types of ball control. So I think we're at kind of an exciting time with SCA fighting, and we're really wanting to open this up on Coach's Corner about how can we take our week of practice. Maybe we only get one helm time period, but what do we do in those in-between periods? How do we build our hand-eye coordination? How about our fight study, where we're watching videos about how fighters succeed and what we can steal from them, put on our laundry list and say, I want to go try to do that at practice, and I want to be able to do what this fighter doing. I want to do it as well as they do. And now I'm going to go take it to my live practice, and that's the thing you work on. So there's a lot of homework and other skill building that you can do that will, by the time you get to that once a week where you get your helm on and you're at that armored practice, now you can really make hay with that. So just wanted to add that in.
And let me add on to that too. That when we're talking about the various numbers, another one of the metrics that I use is how frequently you're doing a thing, right? And it basically comes down to training every day, and that's going to be footwork drills or pel work or video review or walkthroughs and even again some of the unarmored training sort of stuff, but some form of some way to be connected to the sport that does not have to involve putting on all your armor and doing all the stuff. So it's training every day. It's fighting once a week. And again, this is a measure that I've used for 20 years now, right? Training every day, practice, sparring like in armor once a week, and then an evaluation once a month. And that evaluation could come in the form of entering a tournament, or it could be a video review or something of that nature. It could be, getting an actual assessment from somebody. But if you were doing those things at the frequency, if you're training every day, if you're doing practice once a week and you're doing an evaluation once a month, you kind of have to work to screw this up. You are going to get better if you are doing those things at that frequency. And that kind of goes along with what Tristan was saying right there.
So, I think that the key, and, kind of back to the original question, is on my end, I think all of those, I end up doing a lot of those. And believe me, a lot of times I actively work on things like slips and controlling an outside line or trying to get around somebody against newer people, because those are actually a great place where I can practice those things. The hard part is that, there is a lot of training time, but be careful that you're not just spending all that time training. Tristan nailed it on this one, saying that, training time gives you introspection on what you do. I tell you, not only with Sadb, but now with a few others, I've dove deeper into the ideas of what I really understand out of stuff more than I have for the last 30 years. And so, because sometimes I'll look at what I'm doing, I'm like, whew, I guess I'm not doing that, exactly the way I'm saying it or something like that. But even more, when it starts breaking down for you, because it will, you can figure out what you're missing. If your whole time is just out there competing and driving, and you can't explain what you do, I tell you that end date comes faster than you believe, because you're not able to fix things and you're just relying on what you got. And you have to be really careful. But when you spend that time training, you get this goes into the mental side of understanding or means a great deal. So a mix of both is great. If you're not getting out of your practice ever, then you need to hit some tournaments. Getting out of practice gives you a variety of things that you haven't seen before. Those things are incredibly, you have to get them. Otherwise, you may be the biggest fish in a small pond, and that doesn't get you to the end either. So it's a mix of all those things. So appreciate what you have.
Can I throw something on top of that too?
Yeah.
This idea, this understanding of, and Tristan mentioned it too, this understanding of why do I do what I do, right? We several years ago now, we had a discussion on various learning models. One of which is one that I use a lot. It's called Bloom's taxonomy, and it's a hierarchical level of understanding. And a couple of different levels in there are application and comprehension. And application is where you can just do the thing, but you have no idea why it works, right? But that's that comprehension level. And one of the things that Brannos had mentioned that really just, I had to jump in with this, is if you do not understand why what you do is valid, not only is that a, like he said, it's going to come to an end at some point, but for me, one of the difficulties in that is if you don't understand what you do, it is not transferable. You're not capable of teaching somebody why you're kicking ass. And if the skill and technique that you're using is not transferable, then it is useless to us as a sport, right? If you cannot teach it to somebody else, and it's just this thing that you can do, and you have no idea why you do what you do and why it works and why it's valid, it is useless to us as a sport. If we're trying to make the techniques of our sport better, then we need to have an understanding of why this is a good technique and why it is biomechanically sound and all these things. And if you can't do that, it will win you a lot of fights. Whatever that thing is, whatever that magic bullet is that you have, it'll win you a lot of fights, and that'll feel good. But how long is that going to win you fights?
Yeah, I posted that. That's episode 34. Way back table there, and I posted a link to it.
Yeah, there you go. But
I want to add one thing too to what Sean said, because I agree 100% with it. And I will just share kind of one of my own pet peeves are those people that are the opposite side of that. they will go and they will collect, having many conversations with fighters, and they'll collect the concepts and the sayings and the responses. They'll never actually get into armor and be able to do it, but they can explain it. And these people kind of always drove me nuts because, you know, they could talk a big game and they would always be around to, you know, to tell new fighters, like, here's what you should be doing and whatnot, but they couldn't actually demonstrate it because that's all they could do is hear the words of experienced fighters and then repeat them because they wanted to be within that social group, but didn't get into the armor and actually spend the time to internalize it. And I think that's where a good coach is going to be able to not just repeat what they heard maybe from us or from any other experienced fighter, but to say, this is what's worked for me. And it's okay when what you learned through your own experimentation is a little bit different than maybe what your knight taught you or what somebody else taught you, because now you're passing along what you yourself studied and analyzed for what works, not just what somebody else knew. And that's a big thing in the kind of traditional martial arts world. It's very common to just repeat what you were taught from an instructor or some shihan or something because they said it, but you haven't internalized it yet. And when you do, now you're teaching what you know, not what they know. And I think we have a little bit of that happen sometimes too. And it comes down to the why, like Sean said.
Yeah, and that becomes a matter of ownership, right?
Exactly.
It's like once you understand you don't have to, and honestly, you know, this might get a little off topic a little bit, but one of the metrics and one of the measures that I look at for up and coming fighters as to whether or not they're ready to be knighted is whether or not they have ownership of their fight, and that their fight is their fight. And I'm going to call her out, even though she's in the background here. That's one of the things I saw in Sadb right before she got knighted was when I first started working with her, there was a lot of Brannos in her. And then there was a point right when she got offered that I looked at her and I'm like, it is influenced by Brannos, sure. But that fight is entirely hers. And that's kind of what Tristan is talking about is like, you have to have your own understanding of it in order to be able to transfer that to somebody else and be able to teach to somebody else. You know, it's one thing to, not just regurgitate, but even to emulate our trainers and our teachers. And it's like, all of my guys that have been knighted, their core of their fighting is very much a reflection of who I am as a fighter, and that's a reflection of what Brian was as a fighter. But all my guys are vastly different fighters than I am. And because they had ownership and they created their own kind of fight. And I think that's exactly what Tristan was talking about.
Yeah. And this kind of covers into, we know we've talked about this on some of the earlier episodes. Within the martial arts, there's a concept called Shu, Ha, Ri, which are the three phases of training. And Shu is when initially where you start out and you're just copying what you're shown. And it's usually a rough copy. It's a poor copy, sometimes totally crappy, but you're not at any enlightenment level of understanding. You're just not ready for it. And then you get to Ha, which is where you start internalizing and understanding the art, and you start refining your copy, and it begins to become your own. And then Ri, which is you pretty much leave what you were taught behind, and your art is yours, just like what Sean was describing. So it's fine. Don't think that starting out for a first few years of copying what other people are doing and trying it out, that's how everybody starts. So don't reject that out of hand, because that is the way to start going. But don't hold on to those things when you start to feel the stress of, well, this isn't quite working for me, or I think I can do it a little better. Try it. Absolutely. Put it to practice. Your body's going to work different than your knight or your coach. It's you and yours, and it's not just your body, it's also your mind and your spirit are a little different. Maybe you're being taught by somebody who's very assertive and even aggressive, and you've got a different personality style. And I would say that one of my favorite examples of this is seeing the difference between Brannos and Rongwalder. The difference in their fighting is very much a difference in their personalities.
Mm-hmm.
It's the body type is a factor, but much more of it is, the difference of the level of patience in each one, the different level of assertiveness in each one. It's not only acceptable to be different than your mentor or anybody in your practice group. It's going to be a natural thing. It's going to happen. You in fact have to force yourself to fight like somebody else. And at some point you'll realize you're forcing the wrong thing and you need to grow out onto your own. And that's what, getting in armor is going to be able to help you flesh out, but all of it's going to come from inside you, not from an external source.
Hey, Tristan, can I jump on that as well? You're talking about that hot phase, that kind of that middle phase, right? Where it's the, you have to let go of the copy and the mimicry, right? There's a part there that one of my squires is currently kind of hanging on to. It's the I can't do it different because I have to do it right, and there's so much focus on what is correct and what is the right form, and I have to be doing this right, and there's that point at which you're kind of like, okay, now is the time for you to figure out what is right for you.
Yeah.
What is right for your body type? What is right for, like, even you said, what is right for your personality type? Because Brannos and Rongwalder, I've always said that Rongwalder is the left-handed Brannos, right? But
that's right. Plus, I'm much nicer than Rongwalder.
Their personality types impact their style of fighting and who they are as fighters, and it's that thing. It's like, it can't be just what I do. It can't be a direct copy of what I do. It has to be what is right for you, not as what is right for me. But also that last phase you're talking about, that rephase, I always think of that as what Bruce Lee calls no form from form.
Yep.
Right.
Or the void.
The void, right? The Musashi talks about it as the void, right? And it's the and again, that goes back to making it your own and creating your own thing. And that is a thing that there is a point at which you have to let go to allow that to happen, and you have to let that happen, right? But also, when Bruce Lee talks about no form from form, you don't go straight to no form.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like that shoe phase is critically important to understand. I mean, you have to know what the rules are before you can violate the rules, right? But eventually you have
that really is the foundation part. And if you want to jump to the no form, it's like building the second story bathroom on a house before you put in the foundation or the framing. It's just not going to work. Be a pile of lumber laying on the ground.
Totally.
Yeah.
So for the listeners out there,
numbers. Hey, Barry, how many? So at 52 practices a year, how fast do we get knighted?
Well, if we do 50 practices a year, it makes the math easier.
Okay.
Well, so when we did that, when I did that survey, I guess about a year ago, we had a range of the fastest quarter of fighters was about I didn't think it was 300. The average was about 700, and then I think the 75th percentile was like 11 or 1200. But let's take that 700 number. That's something I remember one of the episodes Louis kept bringing up, like 700. That's just a number I throw out there. 700 practices to get knighted. So that's hold on, God, is that 14 years?
Yeah,
that's a long time.
14 years.
Yeah. Hold on. Sorry, my math. I used to be it is 14 years. That just sounds like such a long time.
Although,
to me 29.
Average,
so
what's that? So my understanding on average is for many nights, and I always thought it was too long. It used to be 10 years ago. And now it's more in that 11, 12, 13 range of years to get knighted.
Yeah.
So
now, to be fair,
that number ain't far off, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's about 14 years. So just for anyone listening, it's about 14 years on average if you practice once a week. So if you practice twice a month, think about how long that's going to take. Like if you really want to look at realistically, getting elevated at some point in your SCA career, that's how important these practices are. There's not a lot of people out there, at least not in the recent 10 to 20 years. Sadb said she made it in 10 years, so she'll take it. Yeah. And this is it. We have another episode on here. It's like other things you could do. I mean, I'll be honest. I got knighted. I was very below average for a new knight in best weapon singles. But I was doing a lot of other things. But in terms of just the prowess, yeah, I think, like I said, it's about 700 practices, 14 years. It's a long time. You got to stick with it. You got to be consistent. One thing I want to add to what we've talked about, some of the value of going to practice is that you can't get anywhere else, is getting used to people throwing a stick at your head. And there's some other things. It's not just throwing the stick at your head. It's the movement. It's the footwork, or watching their footwork. I just had a conversation with someone yesterday about he was frustrated because he did all this Pell work in the last week. And then he came in and we practiced and we videoed it. And he said, none of it stuck. And I told him, it's like, well, I think there's a lag between doing Pell work and then when it actually applies to practice.
There absolutely is.
Yeah. And the analogy I gave him was, I play guitar and I learned some lead lines from Metallica song. I practiced them over and over and over. I got them down pat. And then I went and played with my friend. And I was playing with a bass, the three of us, and I was in front of the two of them, and I messed everything up. Just having the pressure of two guys, neither one of that I thought might actually hit me in the head. And I still messed everything up, right? Can I jump in real quick on like some of the strategies I use to get to these practices if, let's say, you have some injury problems or you have a problem getting to practice? So, for example, a situation I deal with at my age with my amount of joint wear, whatever I'm doing, I can realistically, if I'm going 100%, get in about 30 passes a week. That's what my body will handle. Usually that's, and I guess 30, it's 3 fighters. I get a little bit more if I'm maybe working with some new fighters or something like that, or something that's not challenging me, but I get in about 30 passes a week. So I don't really have a whole lot of opportunities to double up. Like if I miss a couple of weeks and I've got to go twice a week, that really stresses my body. So some things that I do are like, for example, last night, I've got golfer's elbow and tennis elbow really hurting my left arm. I did right-handed sword and shield. Now I'm a 2-stick fighter, generally speaking. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna get right-handed sword and shield. If that would stress me too much, one practice I did this year, my left knee was bothering me and my right shoulder was bothering me. So I fought from my knees left-handed. Now, a lot of people might think, oh my God, I'm just going to get my butt kicked. Well, no one actually fought me standing up with their sword and shield. Everyone that I asked to fight also fought me from their knees. A couple people used their right hand and one person used their left hand. And it was actually a really good practice. We actually got a lot out of it, not even just from a scenario situation, like, oh, you might be in this scenario in a tournament, but just, again, I'm focusing on their swords throwing at me. I got to block. I've got to find opportunities to block, hit them, or how do I fake, get them to throw at me or throw a shot, knock their sword out of the way. All these little things that do translate to the bigger picture of fighting. So those are some things I do, and some other things you can do. And this is where you're going to have to take some confidence. These are things we look for in a future peer. But if you don't have a second practice, do you have a friend that fights? Send them a text, give them a call, ask them if the two of you can meet up in someone's backyard and just get some passes back and forth. Maybe you'll work on some things. Maybe you'll just fight. Maybe you do whatever. But that's part of like why I write this stuff down. The goal of trying to get to 50, 52 practices a year is to, oh my God, I'm behind. I got to figure out ways to do this. I mean, one of the things that I do is because I'm focusing specifically on singles in terms of this goal. I actually got in, I think, 60 practices last year if I count everything, but it was 50 singles. I didn't want to at Penzic. I like to fight melees and relax, and I forced myself to go up to the battlefield.
Relax. Don't understand.
Yeah, no, you don't.
Can you spell that?
How are you going to get better relaxing?
Barry, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, Barry, you are so happy. I just did this to somebody last night, and he's probably your age at least. And you're probably much safer there than at my fight practice, because usually, like, my specific goal is I've watched him, like, I get my 10 fights, and then, you know, he starts getting a little tired and he's done. And you know, I did it to him before he got knighted. Now he's been a knight for a while. I did it to him last night, and that was, after you're done, you're going to give me 10 more. Every round. And then he's like, and he is fighting on fumes now. But every time I've done that to him, he's like, he finds that new place.
Oh, nice.
That where he can get to. And he focuses on breathing better. He focuses on finding the single throws where he's going to use energy. And he's learning in those 10 fights. And he's learning that he has a new boundary.
Well, Brannos, let me ask you this question. Where do you camp at Penzic? You with Dark Yard?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Try camping in the bog and seeing how motivated you get to drag a wagon up that freaking hill in the heat and humidity.
It's a short walk to the main field from Dark Yard.
I gotta tell you, man, and you could just be like, 5 minutes, I'll just show up there right on time. I gotta be honest, man. When you had me do that spear class last Penzic, I sat there for like 20 minutes going, they're not gonna show up. I'm so sweaty. I'm so tired from dragging that wagon up the hill. And you're just like laying in your camp, drinking a margarita or something. Be like, I'll show up on time.
I look out the fence line. I'm like, anyone out there? Anybody playing?
Yes. So I don't feel bad for you, though, having to have that sun hit your tent at 7 a.m.
Yeah, I'd like to say too, though, that what Barry is talking about there, you know, and this is something we hear a lot. You know, people talk about when we talk about the number of times you should be fighting or whatnot. We hear a lot about, you know, quantity over quality, and the stuff that Barry's talking about right there is, you know, not only ways to compensate for injury, you know, or whatnot, but I think it's just a great example of, this is a thing that I need to fix. And it happens to be, you know, I got a bum knee, so I'm just going to fight for my knees or whatever, right? It's like, this is the practice that I'm going to have. But all the while, it's, you know, it's a way to improve a particular portion of your fight. And I think Tristan mentioned it too. Like, you know, yes, I mean, it's always, I mean, quantity and quality are not mutually exclusive, right? Mm-hmm. Every practice you go to should be quality practice. And, you know, I mean, taking that time to make sure, I mean, cause, you know, I think Brannos mentioned earlier, it's like, you know, if you're going to practice and you're practicing shit 52 times a year, well, that's what you're going to learn. Right. I mean, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. And I think what Barry is talking about that right there is just some really good examples of ways that you can compensate for injuries and you know, push through. That is a way to safely push through when you otherwise maybe just don't want to, right? Because sometimes we just don't want to, right? And but those are ways, and I think that's kind of the whole point of even the magic number is this, you know, how am I going to get in the time that I need, the quality time that I need, and you know, it also kind of comes down to you can make excuses to fight, or you can make excuses to not fight. And if you have that magic number in mind, and he's like, how can I get one more practice? Like, there's just that, it's in the back of your mind. It's like, how can I get one more practice in? Where can I make that up? It's priorities. Yeah, absolutely.
There's also when you go to a practice, there's one person that's going to make it a quality practice for you, and that's you. When you go to a practice and you are saying, well, is this going to be a good practice based on what other people are doing? And you come away, well, they didn't really help me out, or they didn't really make it. It wasn't a good practice, because it really is your responsibility to make sure you make it a quality practice for you. Don't let even one practice be a shit practice because you're distracted, your heart's not in it, you don't have an idea of what you want to work on, and you don't get anything out of it. If you're going to spend an hour, 2 hours doing something, get something out of it. And there was, I think we did a show on this about a year and a half ago about, how do you get yourself excited to go to a practice? Maybe it's something where, you have a hard time carving time out of your schedule, you got a busy life, or you need motivation. I know a lot of people run into the, I'm just not motivated. I want to be a good fighter. I don't want to work to get to be a good fighter. They get caught in that trap, right? And what I always found was helpful was use the when you wrap up your practice, say, okay, what did I try tonight that started working pretty well? I want to continue working on that. Maybe there's something I saw or learned that I want to expand on. Put together a list of, okay, next practice, these are my top couple of items that I want to work on. And then between the current practice you just wrapped up and the next one you go to, start visualizing, how am I going to get that shot to work? How am I going to add this footwork to my repertoire? How am I going to get to the side of my opponent more? Because I want to be able to be beside them and hit them, not be in front of them and hit them. And start using visualization. I think somebody mentioned that earlier in the chat, which was right on the money. Take that time. You may not consider it practice time, but it is time during the week that you are devoted to sharpening your skills, preparing yourself, and even getting excited. I found that I would spend 4 or 5 days up until practice getting kind of amped up. Like, I'm looking forward to trying this out. I'm looking forward to building on what I started last week and I didn't really finish up. There's more progress I could make. I started looking forward to practice and getting really excited about it. Not, oh my gosh, I got to go do that again. And I got to get, bruises on my hips again. And I got to go, don't think of it like a workout. Think of it like a golden opportunity to do what you love, which is to go and get an armor and fight and work on your skills. You should be excited to do that. That's the good zone you want to be in.
And I'm gonna give you a feel on that one. Is like last night's practice for me. I was incredibly excited. And for no reason, right? Other than, and I'm still excited about it. I did a bunch of free movement work with essentially foam. I was foam all night. I don't make others. Obviously, others don't. They fight rattan, but and that was just to relax my shoulder. But, I did a bunch of work with Sadb, who had no sword and shield. So we ground. Did
you say relax? Brannos, did you just say relax?
This is me relaxed. But
this is relaxed.
That's right. And then, and I fought a bunch of our new guys. And man, the piece was I put my helmet on at the beginning of practice, and I just ground out practice, constant feet, constant moving, calling people out on the field, work heavy movement on them, and then work through some stuff they needed to work on, get the next one in, and just keep doing it until I took my helm off when I was done. And I didn't get a chance to fight Wrongbalder. I had some good unbelts there and things like that. But was that other people's, would look and like, well, you didn't get to fight the best people there. And I'm like, that doesn't necessarily make it the best practice, right? The practice is all up to you and what you're getting out of it and what your goal was. My goal was, I love getting out there and just grinding it out sometimes. And that's what I got last night. I mean, I just sweat from head to toe, footwork constantly, and went, and I'm still excited today. It's really cool.
I tell you, as a trainer, I've had days at our local practice where I get home and the wife's like, how's practice? I'm like, it was amazing. I fought exactly one person. fought one person, but then I had some time to do some training with them. And there was somebody else that had some other things that we needed to work on. It's like, I'd worked with several other people, but as far as, the actual number of fights that I got for myself, like I said, as a trainer, I view practice and the value of practice very, very differently. And me being able to help other people is far more important and far more satisfying than anything I can get for myself. But yeah, there are days I'm completely satisfied. And it's like, yeah, I fought one person, but the amount of people that I was able to help outside of that, totally worth it.
Hey, can I add something in on that? So we're talking about getting the most out of our practice, and I want to sort of talk about sort of both ends of that spectrum. So one is getting the most out of your practice, which is what we always want. But I don't want to have this. There's a phrase for it when it's like the nirvana fallacy. If you can't have perfection, then why bother at all? So a mediocre practice is better than than no practice at all, right? So we want to try to get the most out of our practice. Even a bad practice, I write a blog. Oh, I forgot to fill out my blog. I got to fill it out tonight. I write it in a blog, and sometimes if I have a bad practice or one that's not productive, I write in the last line of my blog is, I got 1% better today. And then these add up, 52 practices is 52%. It's not real numbers, it's just a phrase that I use to remind myself that even though I don't feel like it was productive, sometimes I'll say, a lot of us have played Dungeons and Dragons. You roll a 1, you're like, all right, I got that one out of the way. That was going to happen eventually. This is one I got out of the way. I'm going to move to the next practice. Things you're getting out of a practice. Let's say if no good fighters show up to that practice, you're still getting data. You're still watching people move. You're still moving yourself. Hopefully, if you're taking it seriously, you're not falling into bad habits, but you're moving yourself in the right kinds of ways. Something else to consider, unless you're at the very, very top level of fighter. I mean, one of the things I talked to Duke Sven about recently, who's helped me out with a lot of my fighting, is I realized I go to a tournament and we've got pools. So I had a pool of 12 fighters. I had to get with top 4 advanced. So I had to get through 11 fighters. I had to get through most of them to advance. I had to fight a lot of lower level fighters. I mean, we had a handful of knights. We have a handful of people that are pretty close to being knights. And then we had a handful of newer fighters. And, you might look at a newer fighter. Let's say if you're, an average level fighter and you got to fight a newer fighter. And you might think, oh, I'm much better than this fighter. He's easy to beat. Well, how often do you beat that person? Oh, I beat him like 8 out of 10 times. Okay, so 1 or 2 times you could still lose. And that could be the loss in the tournament that keeps you from advancing. So you're still going to get, and quick side note to that with myself, the problem I ran into is I was only fighting high level fighters. And I actually fortunately, it turned out to be a double kill for me, but I got a double kill with a very new fighter. And what happened was I did my thing and I expected them to bite on my fake or whatever. I did my thing. I hit them. I expected the shot to be done, and I opened up my guard, and their slow reaction came in late, hit me right in the face because I wasn't used to fighting new fighters. And so there's a value to fighting. Again, you're going to see any fighter. You're taking in data. So there's a little bit of that. And then the last piece I want to add, I know a lot of people have been talking about the value of teaching. So there's a couple of things with teaching other fighters. One is it does help you become a better fighter because you understand what it is you're doing. The other piece is that it's better for the society. And even if you don't care about helping the society, if all you care about is getting elevated, well, it's still something we look at. And hopefully maybe you will eventually care at some point. So that is part of becoming a peer, is not just can you fight really good, but can you also, give back to the society? So if you're not there yet, maybe if you do practice, help with people that eventually get there. And also, if it's a crap practice, well, part of it's leadership. Make it a better practice. Motivate people. Figure out, you come home from practice, like, did you get any good fighting in? No. Did you accomplish anything else? Well, I did actually encourage some people to fight and made it a better practice. Well, good. Then that was good.
Totally agree. So
yeah, you can also add to that list, practice your coaching, practice your mentoring, practice, Sean's and Brannos are extraordinary coaches, not because they were gifted from the heavens. They practiced it. They worked with people over and over and over again. And, tons of new people, tons of people that needed help. And that's a good skill to build, right? And you do that through practice. There's a shock.
Me and the first of my 2 squires get knighted, Timur and Turlock, they're constantly talking about how, the people that I'm coaching now get the soft serve version of Sean. And, I gave them the training that I was capable at the time. My training methodology it has evolved, and yes, it has softened quite a bit. And it was I'm very grateful to them, and I tell them all the time that they suffered through the beginnings of me becoming a trainer. And it's what I was able to do with them, and their graciousness has allowed me to evolve into the trainer that I am now, which I think is far more effective. And I think Brannos might agree with that too.
Yeah, I think actually, if you look at coaching all around all sports, coaching has changed significantly, and more and more people are realizing that a positive word is far better than a negative constant, which we had before. Coaching has evolved incredibly through, especially like Olympic sport coaching and things like that. Not only do they think about the physical skills, but the mental skills and the emotional skills that it takes to do what they're doing. And because they're able to understand those better, that they're able to understand and be a better coach because they're thinking about all of those things.
Well, I tell you, I think a great example of that is in Olympic gymnastics. Years ago, we had Carrie Strug, who was cheered and heralded as a champion and as a hero for finishing the Olympics on a broken ankle.
Yeah.
Right. That was what, 2004 maybe. And then you compare that to Simone Biles 4 years ago, where she at the Olympics, she got the twisties, and she decided that she was not going to compete because that is a very real mental thing, that if you do not understand where you are in your rotation when you're doing a quadruple backflip off of a hobby horse or
a bar,
horse, right? Off a hobby horse. Yeah, good times there. But that's just dangerous, right? And years ago, we herald Carrie Strug for toughing it out and winning a gold medal on a broken ankle. It's like, why do we have to have people competing on a broken ankle, right? Like, and I think that Simone Biles acknowledging the mental aspect of where she was, I think is a testament to where sport, to your point, Brannos, is a testament to how sport is evolving and what we consider to be disability or injury or things that affect your performance. And like I said, you get the twisties, that's just flat out dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think we're better at recognizing. I think sport at large is better at recognizing it. I think our sport is far better about recognizing the mental side of our sport than it has for a long time.
I totally agree. And I think, it's fun to watch because we've been talking about, focusing on positive, writing 3 positives down after every day, every practice, things like that. It kind of grows into the idea of gratitude, which is now coming out of a sports world into foundationally everybody's world of mental health, well-being. Being grateful about the things you have brings a much better positive effect on your mental health itself. So it's really, really interesting to see, especially burning through a lot of books, that this is coming to a forefront across all of society. One last thing I want to cover before we jump off, and that is, we talked 52 practices, and in the beginning, if you can do more, Sven brought this up, if you can do more in the beginning, you get the bigger benefit from it. And because foundationally, you have a lot more to learn. Later on, when you have a lot of those things, Miles was just on. He's like, I practice a lot less than I think, and he's a two a week kind of guy. He thinks he's feeling better about himself now. I think in the long run, The top tough fights get much tougher when you're not fighting as much, but you have a lot less. You have foundational skills that are there with you. Those practices can kind of come down a little bit. It's no different than Sean getting in 30 practices this year or 36 practices this year. Those foundational skills can come. The next level to that, though, I will tell you, and this is something that Rongbalder and I are dealing with a little bit, and many people probably will never see this because it just depends on where you are in the game. So if your skills are really important to be very tight, and everything has to be done right to fight at a level that fighting the top guys, then you see it a lot faster, and that is your skills will degrade. Every sport has it. Some very young, some older, but your skills will degrade. And you will get into that space where you are just trying to figure out how to work your basics again. And, like right now, Rongbalder and I are working through some, lower body or core tension addition because we got so comfortable and relaxed that now their core tension isn't there. So now we're refocusing on core tension so we can redeliver power and things like that. But our number now, we've always pretty much done twice a week plus any other time we can. But the idea is sometimes those practices have to come up if you want to try to stay there. Now, unfortunately, it's, in the end of the game, you can't stay there. So the key is it's things like this. I read a great book, Strength to Strength, is as you peak in there, there's going to be a point where you're just trying to hold off the end. You can try harder and you can try harder, but I got bad news. Trying harder don't always get you there. So be aware, understand what you do, start helping people now, start communicating better, start becoming a better coach, becoming a better teacher, because to tell you the truth, that's going to push your span out farther than trying harder at keeping what you have or trying to get better. Because at the end, it's just keeping what you have. And at the very end, it's just getting in your armor. It's just be aware that you are a better, this is proven, older teachers get better reviews from students because they understand the student more. They have more life history behind them. So again, take that opportunity to learn, teach, help, mentor, coach, because that's a great place towards the end to keep in the game, keep in armor, maybe not be, a competitor, like super competitor anymore, or maybe not be a crown competitor anymore, but still be in the game. Good part is our sport, you can still always be a competitor if you're probably up that high before for a very long time, because fundamentally there's great skills there, but the new guys coming up are going to do it better and faster and more than we do it. And these types of shows don't help us keep that. So beware.
Hey, Brannos, about 5 years, I think it was 5 years ago, Adam Vinatieri, who was an NFL kicker, retired. And at that moment, I became older than every professional athlete in a major sport.
There you go, baby.
Major American sport. So we're lucky that guys like you. Are you in your 80s yet?
I only feel like it.
Don't let the beard fool you.
Hey, my shoulders are 2.
Brand new shoulders.
Shoulders are 2. I like that.
All right. Well, there was a lot of great stuff out here. And Sven actually, he says age, injury makes constant change and adjust to all things, right? And I think that's the key, and that's what we're talking about. I think we talked a lot about numbers, but in the end, it comes down to you got to do it, right? Yep. And make the priority to do those things. But inside that, it comes down to a lot of things that Tristan brought up, and that is look at what makes a practice good for you. Look at, I tell you, your practice could be one person, 2 people, but you're learning some specific thing. It could be working with a coach to help you on those things, right? But just, beware that it's, numbers are numbers. But it's really about the commitment you make to yourself. So, well, I'd love to say. Well, first, I'm going to say that this was a great show. You guys, everybody online, everybody that's been watching, thank you very much for hanging out with us and talking with us. And the comments through here was awesome. And Guillaume, I'll talk to you about what's a good fight and what are good fight practice and a bad practice. Because if you have a bad practice, Guillaume brings up something good here, and that is, if you have a bad practice, you should figure out why you're thinking you're having a bad practice. Because if you cannot find that, you won't continue going to practice.
For sure.
So I'd love to say I know what's going on in 2 weeks. But right now it's a little up in the air. We have to have a kind of a meeting and put some shows. There is and let's see if Sadb can pop that up there. There is a link to essentially submit suggestions, and that includes shows to us. We'd love to do some more shows that fit what our folks want. I'd like to get back to a little bit of the books. We still have to finish up some books and review some books. I've really been burning through a lot of books on flow and things like that. I believe we may even have some, not too far off in the future, have some reviews coming, fighter reviews again. And those have been really popular and very, very successful. So, Sean, I believe you guys are kind of working that.
Yeah, we're looking at that. In fact, Primus from our kingdom just commented on there. We are looking at redoing the video review show. We're probably going to look about quarterly. Kind of targeting maybe sometime in February on that. But Primus, who just commented, is he's a graduate, if you will. He was on our video review show. He's one of many, honestly. I mean, we've had at least a dozen people who have been on that show who have since been knighted. We've had at least 3 who have won crown. And I do want to say that is a testament to the work that they have done. It's not so much anything that it's not strictly what we've done, but it's the fact that they were able to willing to put themselves out there and be eviscerated.
Yeah, well, and that's hard.
And then go out there and do the work. So Primus, Gwen is one of those. His Majesty Valentine, who just stepped up in Kaid, His Highness Tilius, they've all been on the video review show. So we're looking at bringing that back a little bit. Me, Helga, Thorfinn, and possibly Octomasades as well. And we may even get some of those folks who were on the show before. So we're looking forward to doing some of that. Look for that. We'll have some information coming soon on that.
Awesome. And then talked about Octomasades. He's sounding like he's going to be in Lockett for some training sessions, and then might have something coming back to the show soon. So
yeah, I'll be there as well. So we're all going down for Roni. Duke Tom from North Shield, Lars, they're coming down. There's a bunch of us. His Majesty Fabian of the West is going to be there as well. It's going to be a good time. Timur, Tierlock are coming joining us as well. It's going to be a lot.
That's a big session for those guys.
It's going to be huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be huge. Super fun. We're very much looking forward to it.
Awesome.
I'm a dog.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, coaches, for coming on. I always learn stuff from you guys all the time. Sorry for my excitement. I'm not normally this excited, but I am normally this excited. Barry can attest to that. And and Barry, I want to thank you for some really hard work on this show. We've been doing this now going on, what is it, 4 years, guys?
No. Yep. Started
5.
in 2020. Yep.
So
5 years.
Oh yeah, Jesus.
Yeah. Look back on it.
Yeah, I know. But Barry's been a really fresh segment for the show.
Yeah.
And
it's been really great
really
to have you, Barry, for sure.
Barry.
Very few people call me fresh, but I appreciate it.
Well, at your age, certainly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to Sadb for producing the show and doing a much better job at it than I ever do. So nobody likes watching somebody to sit there and listen to another person coach on the side. So, but I hope everybody stays safe, gets back back out to their practices, gets back out, hits some New Year's Eve goals, gets back on the path, find people, make friends, go do events, and stay safe. Night, everybody.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.